Hi, this is N1171, and in this video I want to show you a new tool I have created to work with seamless textures in Poser. First of all, let's take a look on this scene. I have 3 props here and 2 figures. This prop here, let me go to the material room. It has 3 materials: the floor, the wall 1, and wall 2. These 2 here, the floor and wall 1, they have 100% seamless textures, and each one of them is a PBR material made of ambient occlusion, diffuse, height map, normal map, roughness map, and a color math I use to connect the ambient occlusion to the diffuse map. So those 2 here will tile all right no matter what I do with the textures. I'm going to show you in a minute. But this one in the back here has a metallic map that the other two don't have, but I want you to pay attention that what the operations we're going to be doing are going to be applied to all of these textures from all these materials. And we're not going to even go to the material room. Everything is going to happen here in the pose room. All right, so I want to call attention that the texture here on wall 2, it's not completely seamless. As you can see here, the Eye of Osiris here, it's cut off and it's not repeating on the other side, so it's not going to tile very well. This row of symbols here is cut in half, and the row in the top has a completely different thing going on there. So it's not going to tile very well, but sometimes we can get away with it. We'll see what we get. But for now, let's open the script. It's called the Matte Tiler. Here it is. It's organized into 2 tabs. The selection and the editing. So when you select something on the scene, you'll notice that it shows the name of what's selected and what materials it has. I'm going to start with the room prop, and it has floor, wall 1, and wall 2. Okay, what I want to do here is I want to tile the floor twice. So I select the floor, go to edit, and here we have 3 operations: tiling, stretching, and offset. I'm going to be working with tiling right now. I want to set this, I'm using the scroll button to set here, but you can just select this and type 3 if you want. I want this to tile 3 times, meaning the whole texture is going to be, a third of the side is going to be tiled like 9 times over this same area. So I click apply, and yeah, I did a mistake. And you're going to be doing too. If you don't pay attention here, we have the scale operation. Divide is the one I want, so I had multiplied, so it gets bigger instead of smaller. So I select divide and apply it again, and now I have it tiled 3 times. And I want to do the same thing to the wooden wall. So I go back to selection, select wall 1, this is the one. And here I want to tile it twice. And this is what we get. But this is a good opportunity to demonstrate what offset can do. Let's switch to offset, because I can give this same tiling here a different look if I offset the texture up, down, or left, right. The feature here is vertical, so I want to tile it horizontally, which is the offset X here. So I'm going to tile it like 25. Let's see what we get. 25 means a quarter of the texture size to the right. If I put a negative number, it's going to shift it to the left. And you can see here that we got a completely different look using the same texture. So that's the power of using tiling and offsetting combined. Let me show you here. The apply button has 3 different operations. If I just click on it, it applies. If I alt click it, which I'm going to do now, look what happens to that texture there. I'm going to alt-click it, and it goes back to default values. It doesn't affect the other tabs, just this one. So I have reset the offset, so you can see what it looked like before. And I'm going to put the 25 here again and apply it. And this is what it looks like now. Let's say I close the tool, and this was set to 0, and I want to edit this again, but I don't remember what value I have used here. So that's the 3rd operation here. If you look at the tooltips, if I right-click this button here, it retrieves the value that's straight from the current scene. So if I zero this again, pay attention to this value here. I'm going to right-click the apply button, it retrieves all the values from the current scene. So you can edit from the current value. All right, so that was tiling on the floor, tiling and offsetting on this wall here. Now we have this other wall here that's not completely aligned with the ground. I have this row here that's cut off in the middle. I don't like that. So let's go back to selection. I'm going to select wall 2, which is this one here. I'm going to go back to edit and to offset. I'm going to reset the values by holding Alt key and pressing and clicking on apply. And what I want to do here is I want to shift this whole texture down so that this line here aligns with the floor. That's a vertical movement, so that's the Y axis. My guess here is 10% should do it. Yeah, there you go. If you notice here, I'm going to undo it and do it again. I have shifted the entire texture down by 10%. Let's do it again. And now it aligns with the ground and doesn't cut on the top. We ended up with a kind of a weird merging of the bottom and top, where we have this vertical thing, which is probably coming from the ink symbol here, and joining with half the symbols from this row. But if you don't pay too much attention, you can get away with it. As I said, this texture is not entirely seamless. This tool is meant for working with seamless textures. I just use this one on purpose to show that sometimes you can get away with textures that are kind of seamless. All right, let's take a render here to see what we have so far. So you can now see them in all their glory of PBR materials, all the stuff we did with the materials. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to show you the stretching. I want to use this cube here as an example. I'm going to scale it on the Y-axis. And you're going to notice the more I do it, the worse it looks like because I'm stretching the texture. It looks horrible, but that's what the next operation I'm going to show you is meant for. I'm going to select the material here and go to the stretching tab. I have 2 options here and 3 parameters. For regular textures, we only have width and height. The depth here is meant for when we have procedural textures based on shader nodes that have X, Y, and Z axis. I'm working with textures here, so I'm only going to worry about width and height. So we have 2 buttons here. One is apply. So if I set a random value here and click apply, you see that it applies the value. But I don't know what values I should be using here to fix the stretching. So I have the auto button here. If you just click that, look what happens. It automatically calculates what numbers need to be in the parameters for the stretching to be removed. This is based on the scaling I have applied to the object. So if the texture is stretching and the object is not scaling in your scene, then you have a different problem. There is a bad UV mapping. All right, so I'm going to apply also a little tiling, like 1.5. And now we have this. So I have turned that cube into a column, and I have automatically fixed the texture. Now, let's do something even more. Let's make this, let's say, I lost a selection here. Okay. The Y, I'm going to scale this down to about a low wall and scale in the X to make it look like a wall. And I'm going to go back, select the material, and go to Edit, Stretching, and I'm going to click the Auto button. I want you to look what happens there. The Auto button automatically calculates what numbers are needed to remove all the stretching based on the object scaling. And that's as easy as it gets. Now let's do something else. Also on the stretching demonstration, I'm going to select the entire room and scale it on the Z-axis to around 300%. All right, so now I have a corridor instead of a little room. But look at what happens to the textures. They are all stretched out. Guess what we're going to be doing? I'm going to select the floor and the wall, those two here. Actually, it's floor and wall 2. This floor and wall 2. And I'm going to go to Edit, Stretching, and I'm going to click the Auto button here, but something is going to go wrong. I'm going to explain why. So I'm gonna click it here, and it has fixed the wall, but look at the floor. It's stretched even more than it was before. Why did that happen? Well, when I model this prop, the UV mapping can go into any direction. So if I select two match zones for, like, for example, this wall and the floor, there is no guarantee that the UVs are gonna be oriented in the same direction, and that's what happened here. So if I go back and select only the floor, go back to Edit, Stretching, I have added a feature specially for handling this kind of thing. So if I hover the mouse here over either height or width, we have two functions on this control. If you look there, the second line says if I right click, it's gonna swap the values between width and height. So you can right click either one. As you can see here, every time I right click, it swaps the values, and that should fix the orientation there. So if I click apply now, boom, it has fixed everything. So that's what we have to do. If you see that the auto button has guessed the wrong orientation for the UV mapping, you just have to right click either width or height, and that should fix it when you click apply. You may be thinking, hey Ken, why don't you automate this, make the script automatically figure out what orientation it is? The thing is, those are just numbers. You have no way of knowing unless you look at it as we are looking now and realize that it's oriented different from what I expected. Well, if there is a way to guess this, I couldn't figure it out. So for the time being, that's how it is. We have a quick way, one-click fixing for it. Let's render our corridor, see what we get. We now have the seamless and not so seamless textures in all their glory in PBR. You might notice here the floor, I can see some repetition patterns. That's because I have tiled this 3 times on the floor, and the texture was not meant to be seen from far away. So if I do a closer render, let's say here, you'll see you won't notice that tiling anymore. But again, that depends mostly on the texture. That's going to vary a lot. So one last thing I want to show you here is I'm going to get this wall here. I'm going to duplicate it. Here it is. And I'm going to move it back over here. And I want you to take a look. They look identical, right? Of course, it's a copy of one another. So I'm going to select this one in the back, select the material, go to offset, and I'm going to reset the values here, and I'm going to put some random values on Y and X, and I want you to pay attention to what happens there. I have shifted the texture to a little amount, and what that does, if you look here, the two walls don't look the same anymore, even if they have the same texture. They're a copy of one another, but I have shifted the textures by using offset, and now they look like completely different. Well, maybe not completely different, but they are not identical anymore. Let's do a render here. You can see that they don't look the same anymore. So that's one more thing you can do with offsetting with seamless textures, so that you can give a different look to a copy of an object that uses the same textures. So that's more or less what I wanted to show you about all the tool can do, the 3 operations, styling, stretching, and offset, and all the stuff you can do with it. And I think this shows not only what the tool can do, but where you can use all these features. That's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching.